tangi te titi, ka tangi te kaka, ka tangi hoki e hao, tena koto katoa. Ko pensho heo te moanga, ko wea te awa, ko English toko iwi, ko Geordie toko hapu. No dorum e hao, ko Professor David Millar roho ko Mary Millar oku matoa, ko Nigel Millar toko ingoa. No rewa, tena koto, tena koto, tena koto katoa. Thank you for that introduction, Curtis. It's a privilege to be here. I've looked forward to this talk for a long time. I had a lot of talks. This is one I really want to be involved in, so thank you to the RDA for inviting me and for taking this initiative. This is really important, I think, that we do this. That we start to rejoin the medical profession. I felt at times in New Zealand there has been a division between the RMOs and the other lot. And we need to abolish that. And this is a really good step towards doing it. I will start with a patient story because that's what we're here for. A man who lived a life that had been forgotten. I was asked to see a patient as he was behaving badly, as described to me. He was being abusive to the nurses. He keeps shouting orders at us and demanding things. So I went to see him. There he was, lying in his bed diagonally, mainly because he was well over 6 feet tall and didn't fit. A lean and rather frightened man of well over 80. So I sat down and asked him to tell me about his life. And we talked. He was a sergeant major in one of the Guards regiments, or the cavalry regiments, I'm not sure which, in London. Told us something about him. In the war, I asked him what happened in the war. He said, well, in the war, he was in charge of sorting out all the horses in London. So what did he do? At the outbreak of war, his job was to organise and carry out the plan to evacuate them from London to Palestine, where they thought they might be of some use. They did so. But when they got to Palestine, there was no food for the horses. So each trooper was ordered to shoot their own horse. He gave the order. He told me this with tears in his eyes. He was mildly delirious. We talked at length with the nurses, shared the experiences, and hopefully made a difference. Real clinical governance is when I can be confident. That happens when I'm not around. So, Bristol Children's Hospital, you've heard a lot about this, thought to be the root of clinical governance, or Bristol Royal Infirmary. That actually tells you something about the problem, because the paediatric cardiologists were in one hospital and the paediatric surgeons, cardiac surgeons were in another. I was in Bristol at the time as a registrar. And you might think, well, there was not enough measurement, people didn't know, there was not counting, people weren't looking at mortality. I was a registrar of medicine at Southend Hospital. I knew about this. I feel bad about that now. I'm not sure what I could have done, but I knew on the grapevine the outcomes for cardiac surgery for children were poor. A lot of people knew. It was in the paper, actually. So what happened? It was a cultural issue, an issue of behaviour and professionalism. People didn't speak up. The then chief medical officer, or whatever he was, chief executive, John Rowlands, actually lost his job at his registration because one day, knowing, having been informed that a particular surgeon was unsafe to carry out an operation in the opinion of other people like anaesthetists, he said, it's not my business to tell the surgeons what to do. That's what happened. So, things have not moved a lot. Just recently, in June, a report came out, 15 years after the original report, which was the plan to sort out children's cardiac surgery. It's taken 15 years. And you can see what's here. You sort of think, oh, oops, hang on a minute. Supporters turn out in force because they set some standards, and the battle to save the heart centre in Leicester is on. parents, families, supporters, 200 of them, are all going to a meeting. And they had to hear the paediatric cardiologist. He'd be a man to trust, wouldn't he? And they will, along with the local MP, they will outline the implications of closing the children's cardiac unit in Leicester. What do you reckon? Is that clinical governance? We're a medical profession. We're in the position that we're in through the good grace of society, not because we call ourselves doctor, or might have a PhD and actually be a doctor. It's given to us, not by right, but by circumstances and the goodwill of society. The standards set are 500 operations a year. Sounds about right to me, 10 a week, and 4 surgeons. Sounds about right to me, about 125 operations a week. You know, a year, you want these people to know what they're doing. So what's wrong with that? I'm not going to mention neurosurgery, so I'll move on. I've got to keep my job. Manchester, similar problem. They're going to close down the unit in Manchester, doing congenital heart surgery. It's going to be scrapped. So the hospital trust says, we've worked hard to develop proposals to improve things, we're disappointed, but the care and well-being of our patients is paramount. Now that's interesting. Our priority is to work closely with Liverpool to make things smooth for the patients and families. That's clinical governance. Tough decisions in the interest of what we're here for, which is for patients. It's not necessarily just measurements and numbers. We have to do the measures. I'll come back to that. So what is clinical governance? I went to a meeting at the Rackma College. A few of us sat down, we went to define clinical governance. We sat there all weekend. I don't think we got it done. I've got my little short version, if you really want to remember. The means by which we remain collectively true to our vocation. That's clinical governance. Because what is our vocation? It's not just to treat and manage the patient in front of us, or our patient group. It's to be responsible for that patient group, but also for the wider implications of what we do. What we do to one patient impacts others. And it's as simple as that. If you want to remember clinical governance, from my point of view, nice simple sentence, you don't have to wait long. You know, never mind Scally and Donaldson and all them. So, however, it's got a longer history than Bristol. It goes back to Plato. If you want to read the Republic, you will see. Is it also not true of the physician, insofar as he as a physician considers or enjoins what is for the physician's interest? For we have agreed that a physician, strictly so called, is a ruler of bodies and not a maker of money, haven't we? If you want to read about clinical governance, read George Bernard Shaw, The Doctor's Dilemma. This is well worth reading. It should be a recommended text for medical students. And this is for the benefit of Andrew, to entertain him that any sane nation, having observed that you could provide for the supply of bread by giving bakers a pecuniary interest in baking, should go on to give a surgeon a pecuniary interest in cutting off your leg, is enough to make one despair of political humanity. But that's precisely what we have done. And the more the mutilation, the more the mutilator is paid. He who corrects the ingrown toenail receives a few shillings. He who eviscerates your insides receives hundreds of guineas, except when he does it on a poor person for practice. So I recommend, as a reading of how to manage and control the medical profession, you read The Doctor's Dilemma. I've already recommended it to Andrew, and he's going to bring it into the medical council. So, a little bit of entertainment, but remember, these things are not new. How physicians, doctors fit into society. And our position, as I said, is only happenstance, it's only temporary, it will disappear if we as a profession don't step up. If you want to understand the humanity, see this TED Talk. Anyone seen this TED Talk? Handfuls? You're in for fun. You'll love this. It's just about the relationship with the patient. I'm a great advocate for modern technology. I want the latest and greatest medical records, devices, gizmos. But you know what they're for? They're to make it easier for me to provide the ancient art of healing to patients. Because healing is what we do. Clinical governance isn't just for the governors. You know? What's your governance, gov? It's actually, for all of us, a leadership issue. Leadership is not something necessarily attributed to position. You can be a leader as an RMO quite easily. A leader is just somebody who follows. And the question is, are our people in good hands? And you should read that report. I see it was included in the pack. The Good Hands report still stands the test of time. It's an excellent report. Perhaps modified by the last speaker yesterday, but it's good. So considerations for a CMO. One of the political masters of the UK was Tony Benn, and many of you will not know or have heard of Tony Benn, but those who will smile to yourself and think, what a mad man. Why is he? Tony Benn was a very wise man. He thought the second Iraq war was unjust, so he went to Iraq and spoke to Saddam Hussein. He even paid his own plane fare, you know. And he's a man of conviction. Anyway, he wrote in one of his books, Advice for His Grandchildren, which is actually worth reading, although it's written for his grandchildren. I read it, it's great. When it comes to people in leadership or control positions, positions of power, what power have you got? 5 questions. What power have you got? Well, I'm CMO. Not a lot of power. Okay? An RMO rang me when I was in Christchurch and said, Deborah doesn't know about this, you'll be entertained, and said, I've been sacked. And I said, oh, that's interesting. How did that happen? Well, I just went to my ward round, the surgeon said, I'm sacked. So what do I do? And I said, oh, come and see, we'll talk. And I said, not even the CMO gets to sack RMOs. You know, so where's the power? There isn't power, it's an illusion. I've only got influence. Where did I get that influence from, or that power? By the acceptance of everyone else. I'll come to that later. In whose interest do you exercise it? I do not exercise it in the interest of doctors. And I've said that to many doctors over the years, some sharp intakes of breath. It's not my job to advocate for the medical professional or even put their point of view. I exercise whatever authority, power, in fact influence I have, only influence it on behalf of patients. It's very simple. To whom are you accountable? Well, to the chief executive, but actually to patients. I feel I'm accountable to the community. It's hard at the moment for the community to express that, but you can work on that. How can we get rid of you? RMOs from Dunedin, you shouldn't be listening to this, or Invercargill. But how do you get rid of the CMO? You simply get enough signatures on a letter that says we've lost confidence, and I'm out the door. It's as easy as that. Mine is an unstable position. I'm not in a position of authority. Any significant group could dispose of me. So if all the RMOs signed a letter saying, on your bike, it would be. So, I want to be the leader. I want to be the leader. Can I be the leader? Can I? I can? I'm the leader? Yippee, I'm the leader. Okay, what should we do? It's a very subtle ending line here, because leadership in health is what I would call adaptive leadership. It's not directive leadership. I don't tell people what to do. My job is to help them solve their problems, but actually, more importantly, to help them understand their problems. Help them point in the right directions to where the whole place is going, so their problems can fit into that, and then they can find solutions. And then my job is to help them enact those solutions. So if you want to read about leadership in health and be successful in leadership, simply look up the term adaptive leadership and read that. It's Roger McGough, as I like to remember him, and that was rather similar. He was the leader of the Scaffold, if you remember that group. Somebody might. Livy the Pink, someone remembers it? Too young. It's a funny song. Okay. Are we in the world, or are we in a false world? Sometimes in medicine, we're in the world of Harry Potter. A sort of bubble inside humanity that's separate and special and exalted, where we, the doctors, are the wizards and the rest are muggles. And doctors can do anything, like run a bank, fly a plane, anything, but only doctors can do doctoring, because it's the highest profession you could aspire to. The whole purpose of society is to support doctors in doctoring and medicine. In case you're worried, that is an illusion. The rest of society has moved on. We are in the dark ages when it comes to being organised, structured. As Chai pointed out yesterday, we are miles behind. Your whole world is online except your health record. We are not the wizards. We are not that important. A bit of humility goes a long way. So the tensions in organisations around clinical governance are around three things. The manage and control model, which is the assumption. The managers want to manage and control you. The measure and improve model. We're going to measure all the parameters we can to see if it's safe and effective and works. And we're going to have a really good idea. But actually, the business we've got to be in, and if we don't get in this business, we're out of it. The whole of it is transformational. Changing totally the way we do things. Not the act of healing. I feel like Donald Trump, didn't I? Not the act of healing. That stays as it is, but the way we organise ourselves is different. You know, it should be, doctor, the patient's ready to see you now. That's clinical governance. So, make it simple. There are only 4 things you need to consider when you're thinking is something good or bad in health. Is it making it safer? Is it making it more effective? In other words, is it going to work? You're getting the right outcomes, both for the individual and for the population. So it's getting the population outcomes includes equity. Is it more efficient? Sounds like a bad word. Well, I'll tell you what, 30% of the effort, therefore money, therefore human resource, in the hospitals you work in is wasted. You know where it is. You can find it quicker than I can. So I want to know about it. We need to make it a better experience for the patient, but also for all the health workers involved, including our remote nurses. So those 4 things give you a framework on which to hang things. I probably should have equity separately, but I've tended to include it in effectiveness, because if you take population effectiveness, equity is part of that, but maybe it should be separate. I'm going to talk a little bit about safety. Just to say, you've all seen this. This is not enough as an analysis. If you think you've got it by going a few slices of cheese, less holes, more slices, that is not fixed safety, that is not the issue, it's part of it. You need deeper understanding, so read this book by James Reason, and I'm going to just look at the front cover of the book. This is the start point. Basically, this has got a pointer on it. I'm worried to press a button, something's going to happen. There we are. Hazards. Slices of cheese or blocks, things stop happening and things going wrong. Very simple. That's our analysis quite often in health, and that's what we look at. We're missing the point. There's more to it than that. Even this is not enough. We sort of do all this and then we try and work out what people did that was wrong, and then we try not to blame them. We work out who was to blame, and then we say, we'll not blame you. And we sort of investigate downwards and get things upwards, and we make some benign changes like more policies and procedures, more education. Basically try harder, which is the last resort of quality. The last resort. Try harder. Everything says you've got to try harder to remember something, to not do the wrong thing. That won't improve quality. So, you have to go deeper. What were the local workplace factors? What were the latent conditions that led to this? I'll come back to this shortly. But what were the organisational factors? The foundation of your organisation. And if you really read about Mid-Staffordshire, you only have to read one thing about Mid-Staffordshire. The chief nurse in Mid-Staffordshire said the care of patients on the wards was not her responsibility. You don't need to read any numbers. That's it. Done and dusted. That place needs to be completely reformed. So, give you some ideas. Everything's dangerous in health. Do not think it's safe. Even cutting a patient open with a scalpel is really dangerous. Bacteria, gravity is universal, and all drugs have an LD50 just about. I don't know about lactulose, it probably does. So, the barriers are unreliable, they're human. For systems, it's very complicated, and there are many steps and many people. So, we're heading for trouble. Everything's unsafe, the barriers are not reliable. and carries on. We've got to stop further than removing barriers, strengthen them, or blaming people. We've got to get deeper. So let's go deeper. The culturally accepted norms. You can just rush. Let's just get on with it. Missed hand hygiene. You know, hand hygiene is perfect in one part of the hospital. I'll tell you where it is shortly. Every hospital has perfect hand hygiene in one department. Rushed handover. You've got to take the hand off a handover, talk it back, all those things. Then the environmental stuff, interruptions, warning overloads, buzzers going up, you've got to go to ICU, there's buzzers everywhere. Not enough information, bullying, fatigue. And that's down to rosters, but it's also down to self-management. It's our responsibility not to be tired. And the organisational stuff, financial focus, as in Mid-Staffordshire. Safety seen as a frontline issue, as in Mid-Staffordshire. A belief in professional excellence, the doctors have sorted it out because they're good people. Detachment, you know, the corporate office doesn't get involved. And a culture of, you can pass credit upwards to the corporate office, but blame always goes downwards. That's a common cultural model. So, what are we going to do? We have to change things. We have to start with the culture of safety is everything. Safety at the beginning of every agenda. That has not been achieved with district health boards, despite it being on in good hands. Safety rounds, so that the management team need to be involved in safety rounds. Remember, care is the business, not dollars. And adaptive leadership. And reverse the plan that credit can go down and risk can go upwards in the organisation for communication. Remember, credit is infinitely divisible. You can give it to as many people as you like. The minute you take a slice for yourself, it disappears. We need to redesign workplaces completely. IT that supports healing, as I said. Better alarms. Compassion. Who's got compassion fatigue? Is there an excuse for compassion fatigue? Possibly. Don't worry. And the whole fatigue management, including personal fatigue management. Then we need to culturally accept these things. Time. Theatre hand hygiene is perfect. So if we do it in theatre, why can't we do it on the surgical ward? Why not? Cultural acceptance. So culture is everything in this. And zero harm for falls. So we know all the hazards. We know what they are. We can anticipate the dangerous drugs. We can prevent the falls. We can wipe out bacteria, and we can make cutting people open safer by being even more useful, careful with checklists and so on. We will remember that people are human, that systems can be reliable, we'll simplify things, and we'll have less steps involved. We won't add a step to make it safer, we'll take 4 out. And then we'll believe there is a zero harm aspiration. We'll look deeper, better systems, stronger barriers, no more blame, just an accountable organisation and leadership culture. Let's quickly run through the depth we need to go to in patient safety. So I will post all these slides. You saw my Twitter handle at Nigel Millar NZ. I'll send a tweet out as to where they're posted. That means you've got to follow me. So you can see all the slides and follow this back through. So let me finish off. Medicine used to be safe. The 5-minute panther, is it? Right. Well, it's cute anyway. Cyril Chandler said medicine's inherently unsafe. Yeah, I'll just finish up with a poem. Rather than going through any more of my slides. That must have been a hint. Arts and poetry, literature, music are all part of our experience of life. And they should be integrated into what we do. They are the things that support us to continue. You can read a medical textbook, it doesn't make you feel any better. It just reminds you what you don't know. So here's a poem from Tessa Ransfield, who's a lovely Scottish poet, sadly died recently. She gave me permission to use this at conferences. It's called Hospitalisation. Illness tossed you over the rails of our world. The huge hospital swallowed you and swam away, to go through its routines with you, deep and distant. I could no more than paddle in that element, but came often to watch from the shore and scan the surface. After a secret number of days and hidden nights, after fathomless hours enclosed in the whale's belly, floating on tides of attention and murmurs, the hospital will spit you out again at my feet. The sand suddenly swept with scuttling pebbles, sprays of scum and shells, as you come up on it. I begin to lead you home, only to discover we're on a foreign shore. Thank you very much.
Kia ora, thank you Nigel for the further book reading and references. I'm going to be busier after this conference catching up on all the reading that we're getting, so thank you for that. And you're a refreshing example of experience in the healthcare system, but still maintaining an enthusiasm for the application of technology and in clinical care that we deliver. And also remaining humble in leadership. And that we're there by the grace of, so thank you for that. Well, I just have one reflection to start with. Now, I thought we'd just maybe got time for 5 minutes of questions before we move on to the second half of this session. You mentioned the aspects of clinical care being faster, more effective, more efficient, and a better experience. Now, oftentimes those can be in tension or opposition, even. So how do you sort of manage, how do you manage your way through that? I don't want to necessarily use neurosurgery as an example, but
it was actually safer, more effective, more efficient, and a better experience. I'll rehearse that. Okay. Well, safer. Well, I've given you examples of my understanding of that. More effective is we've got to know our outcomes. Are we actually delivering what we said to deliver to the individual patients, to our group of patients, and to the population? So we must know what we're doing is effective, and that's clinical audit, outcomes measurement, population health, all those things. More efficient, you think, does that conflict? Well, no, it does not conflict. We did a patient flow analysis recently in Dunedin. We looked at stroke. And so the team were doing the whole flow and they had about an hour to lay out the flow. Well, after 3/4 of an hour, they were still on thrombolysis, which is like 5% of patients at best, probably many less. Dubious effectiveness, if you ask me, the physician doesn't know the story. And they had, so I said, what about the rest of the patients? What about the rest of the strokers? I'm sitting there with, left hemiparesis, I can't move my arm and leg. What happens to me? Oh, well, so it turns out those patients can sit on a trolley for 2 hours. Now, it's not a hard diagnosis, My arm and leg doesn't move, doctor, It's pretty, it doesn't take even a trainee intern to work that one out, So why are they on a trolley in ED? Why is ED overflowing when there's a bed on the ward? So, patient flow is a really good example of change efficiency. We should, every movement in patient flow should be pulled. There should be no patients looking for beds. There should only be beds looking for patients. So when there's an empty bed on the ward, the team should be saying, where is our next patient, ED? Come on. We need some work here. Are you mad? People say to me. No, I'm not. I learned this from a ward sister in 1980-something, who said to me every day when I was on take as a registrar, she'd ring me up and say, 9 o'clock. She'd say, Nigel, I want 8 patients by 3 p.m. I've got 8 beds. I want them full by 3 p.m. And I didn't work out. I finally went and asked her, why are you doing this? She said, well, it makes the place run efficiently. I can sort out the staffing, I can provide adequate care for the patients, they're sorted out before everyone's gone home, and they get better care. So it's safer, it's more effective, and it's more efficient. And it's a better experience, because if you're the RMO, you're not actually tied up for hours not getting home.
Okay, thank you, Nigel. We've got time for a couple of questions from the audience for Nigel, and we may come back and have a little 2-person panel depending on time for the next session as well.
Burning question since yesterday. It's been an awesome talk, very inspirational speakers. My problem is not so much affecting change. I mean, anyone who's worked with me in any psych department would know that I've made lots of changes. When I joined Palmerston North Hospital, their psych department was $1 million. That's $1 million in deficit. And within 3 years, no, it was actually 18 months, they were $1 million in surplus, which meant that, well, I was the only registrar and I had one boss and a MOS. So collectively, we had made $2 million. And what did they do with the 1 million? All I wanted was a couple of iPads. This is before Calm was even created by Auckland University. So we could do a mood diary, so that would cut down the wait list for psychology and what have you. But the funding went to the radiotherapy department because, obviously, you know.
Okay, so I'll shortcut the
answer. But my question is...
Sorry, do you want to take the question just around your resource allocation?
No. I do have a point to this. So my question really is, not so much how to affect change, but how do you stay in position to perpetuate the change? As in, you know, once you start making changes, they see you as the troublemaker, and they try very hard to get rid of you.
Okay, I think that does touch on a point that Nigel made around leadership remaining there, so thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so look, no department owns any money.
Oh no, it wasn't about
No, just so you know, because it's public money, it gets, someone's got to make an allocated decision on that. So how do you keep the change going? Well, the problem is that being right is not enough. Okay, you have to be persuasive. So if any of you, I don't want to get into a long discussion.
I have to draw it to a conclusion there, just in the interest of time, and also because sorry, I just need also to acknowledge our other speaker from yesterday, Professor Paul Zollinger-Reid, just thinking about Nigel from the UK, Paul from the UK, and our next speaker from the UK as well. My final reflection would be the Swiss cheese model. There are which is frequently trotted out, the concept of holes lining up, which you presented, Nigel, creating, leading to error when all the barriers have holes in them. I have seen a lot of medical error, but I've never seen a piece of cheese with a hole that goes all the way through it. It's just an interesting sort of concept. Anyway, can we thank Nigel for his time, and then we'll welcome him. Thank you. Our next speaker is Dr. Michael Roberts, who, as I mentioned, is also, or trained in the UK at least, but subsequently he's seen the light and moved to New Zealand, like so many others over the millennia, where he's practiced in New Zealand as an emergency, in the emergency medicine as a specialist, and more recently worked as the Chief Medical Officer at Northland District Health Board, so from Southland to Northland. He has a long-standing interest in patient safety and is old enough to remember that he qualified before the Bristol Royal Infirmary tragedy, and from which the concept, as we've heard from many of our speakers, of clinical governance has emerged. Having seen the effects of avoidable harm on patients and staff on many occasions, he's committed to identifying ways in which these events can be eliminated, as are we all. Thank you, Dr. Michael Roberts.
One person with a Mac, isn't there? Awesome. This is really good because it means he can't cut me off at the end with a picture of Panda because I'm driving my own slideshow. Look, thanks so much for the invitation to come and speak today. I consider it a real privilege to have some of your time. And like Nigel, I think the topic that you've chosen for your conference this year is a fantastic one. It's an issue which doesn't get enough airtime with RMOs, as I see it, and you RMOs in the room are the future of clinical governance, and without you it will continue to be not quite as effective as it should be, which is what happens at the moment. So look, I was really excited about coming to talk to you. I have to say I became slightly less excited when I realised that I was going to be speaking immediately after Nigel Millar and on the same topic. Some of you won't know Nigel, but I usually meet him at the National CMO meeting where all of us in the group regard him quite rightly as something of an intellectual giant. And coming up to speak after him feels a little bit like having the Spice Girls coming out after the Rolling Stones. Not of course that I look like any of the Spice Girls, I think. But I'm happy to give it a lash, and my talk is essentially to address the question of that I have on this slide: attitudes and behaviours, or processes and structures. To start the presentation, I want to tell you a story. And before I tell you the story, it's important that you know I have a twin brother who is a Mexican drug baron. And a few years ago, was visiting him in Mexico, and a result of bad timing and some bad luck on my part, I was caught in a police sting which was intended to result in his arrest. And in fact, it was I who was arrested, charged, put before a court, found guilty, sentenced, and found myself in a very, very unpleasant Mexican prison which had a reputation that nobody had ever been able to escape from. My brother, who I haven't always got on with terribly well, realised his opportunity, and he actually went back to New Zealand and worked for almost 3 years as the Chief Medical Officer in Northland without anybody apparently noticing. But anyway, there was I left incarcerated in this Mexican prison. And because I wanted to get back to my family and to Northland District Health Board, I was determined to escape. So almost as soon as I was there, I started trying to make friends, and every evening at dinner I moved to a different table, talked to different people. Most of them were drug barons. Quite good stories, some of them told. But I was always asking the same question. They say nobody's ever escaped from this prison. So who's tried? And what can I learn from what they've tried? And how am I going to be able to best have a chance of escaping? But as soon as I excuse me, asked that question, nothing, stony face, not a word. And nobody would talk about it. I didn't understand it. I went on and on. But after a few days, one evening after dinner, lingering over my long black and after dinner mints, the oldest prisoner, who was the janitor, did the sweeping up after the meal, came over and sat down next to me, and he said, "Gringo, there is no point." They all called me Gringo. Gringo, there is no point in asking your question, because none of the people here are going to talk to you about their escape attempts. He said, "We've all tried, and we've all failed. It is true, nobody has ever successfully escaped from this prison. But nobody will talk about their failures. These guys are drug barons, okay? They don't do failure, they do massive success. And none of them are going to talk to you." So that was a bit of a downer, really, because I felt I didn't have much of a head start, and I didn't have any sort of great intrinsic knowledge of how to escape from prison. So I took the plastic spoon I'd been using for my pudding, sharpened it as best I could, and went back to my cell. And looking out of the window, I tried to work out where I should dig my tunnel. Looking out right in front of me from the one rather small window I had, I could see there's a big long distance out to a very high wall and lots of barbed wire in the distance. And that looked like an awfully long way to dig with just a plastic spoon, even though it was sharpened. But if I twisted my head around and really leaned up against the bars hard, I could see that out to the left, it looked as though I was right near the end of the block of cells, and the wall was much closer. So I thought, that's going to be the way to dig. So I started. It took me a long, long time. And unfortunately, my escape attempt was unsuccessful. I don't want to dwell on that in a lengthy explanation, but on the basis that a picture tells 1,000 words, I've got an artist's representation of the very last few minutes of my dig. So here I am. And you can see that after 1.5 years of digging with my little plastic spoon, it's not going to end up well, is it? So, sure enough, I made my way into the brown stuff, and very quickly went back to my cell, cleaned up, and sat there, and I actually fumed, because I realised that if the guy who was in the end of the block of cells had been prepared to talk to me, I would have known that when I looked to the left there was a wall nearby, but there was a dunny in between me and the wall, and I would have known not to dig in that direction. So I was annoyed, and in my sort of fairly annoyed state, I went back down to dinner, and I laid it on the line. I sat at the table with all the biggest drug barons, and I said, "Guys, this is not good enough. You know, we're all in our own way successful people, and we're all stuck in this prison. And just because none of us are prepared to talk to each other about the mistakes we've made, nobody's ever escaped. That if we actually put our minds to it, if we sat down and talked about all the things we've tried and gathered together all that we know about how to dig tunnels and so on, or whatever sort of escape we're going to have, we'd be a whole lot more successful." Well, everybody was silent again until one person spoke up and he said to Gringo, they still call me Gringo, he said, Gringo, you tell us what you think we should do. So I said, okay, look, I've been thinking about it. Okay, so we need to plan our escape. Yep. What we need to do, if we're going to be successful, if we're going to be effective in our escape plan, we need to get together and we need to have some people check the evidence. Well, there must be a best evidence basis of how to escape from a prison. There's a lot of people have escaped from prison. So what are the best ways to escape from a prison? What are the best ways to escape from a Mexican prison? What are the best ways to escape from a Mexican prison built on rock? Yeah? And we need to research the previous attempts to escape from this prison. You guys can't just sit there and not say what happened to you. You've all tried to escape. You all will have done things that were good, and you all obviously did things that weren't good because none of you managed to succeed. But if we pulled it all together, we ought to be able to develop a plan. Somebody at the back said, I never tried to escape. It's too risky. So I said, yeah, of course it'll be risky. Trying to escape from a Mexican prison is always going to be risky. But if we actually sit down and talk about the risks and make a list of them and understand what they are, we can probably work out a way to minimise those risks. And when we know what the risks are and we know how we've minimised them, we can monitor them and make sure that we're not making any more mistakes than we really need to. And if we do decide to dig a tunnel or whatever we decide to do, if we make mistakes, we should tell each other. We shouldn't be sitting there, we don't want to let anybody know I stuffed up. We should say, hey, I buggered up today, but I know why it went wrong, so we can all learn from it. And even better, if we have a near miss that nobody notices, then we can talk about that, because that's something we can put right without anybody even getting hurt. And when there is a big mistake, we'll investigate it, we'll look into it carefully, we'll find out what went wrong, and we'll learn from it. We won't forget what we've learned. And I said, and this will be a first for a Mexican jail, we'll have a blame-free culture. I said, there can be no more thinking somebody's got something wrong and nailing their head to a coffee table. That's not how it's going to work from now. Okay? We're going to have a blame-free culture. If somebody puts their hand up and says they've got something wrong, we're going to celebrate it because we can learn from it. Well, there's getting to be a bit of sort of positivity in the room now, which is good because I've been feeling quite nervous. And a guy at the back says, I know how to dig tunnels. The other thing, we all know how to dig tunnels. They weren't going to be outdone. But the guy at the back persists. He said, no, I really know how to dig tunnels because I was a commercial tunnel digger before I went to prison for fraud. And my company dug some of the biggest tunnels in the world. So there's still a bit of, because nobody likes to be outdone if you're a Mexican drug baron. I don't know if you've met many, but they don't. And so I said, hang on. If this guy really knows how to dig tunnels, then he can teach us how to dig tunnels really well. Yeah. We can get him to give us an education program. Yeah, we can put on education about how to dig effectively. We can find out how to dig safely. Yeah. And when we've learned, we can sit a little exam to make sure, because I'm going to say, if somebody's going to go tunneling, they really ought to be proven that they can tunnel safely before they go down into the tunnel. Because if somebody goes down there and they're not properly trained and they collapse the tunnel on top of somebody, that's going to be an absolute downer. And I said, just to make it even more robust, when people have trained and passed their exams and they're tunneling, every month or so, we'll bring them back for an appraisal just to make sure they've kept up to date with any changes in the tunneling procedures. So then I said, do you think we should involve the public? I come from a hospital background, I'm not a drug baron, they knew that. And, soft hands. And I said, we always involve the public when we're making big changes in the hospital. Do you think we should involve the public? That was the one thing I didn't get across. They didn't feel that we should involve the public at all, really. They wanted to keep it pretty quiet, which is okay. So somebody said, this is going to be very complicated. We're going to need to keep track of everything. I said, we certainly are. I said, we need an IT department. I said, there'll be computer geeks in here amongst us, and we need to set up a proper information system so that we can keep track of it. We need to know the guard rosters. We need to know which guards are on when, because some of the guards walk around the perimeter anti-clockwise, some of them walk around clockwise, some of the guards are bribable, some of the guards aren't bribable. We need to know what they're working when. We need to have digging rosters. We want to be sure that everybody's doing the same amount of digging and they get the same number of night shifts and the same number of day shifts. Where's Deborah? Can you all tell it later? This is that's for the digging rosters. When I told my chief executive I was coming to talk at the RDA conference, he said, "Don't talk about rosters." I actually hate being told what I can and can't do, so I have to talk about rosters. So I've done it now. Okay. Then with that IT system, it'll help us to motivate people. We can have, meters since the last lost time injury, because that shows that we're tunneling effectively and safely. We can have meters per team, so there's a bit of competition. Everybody liked the idea of that because drill barriers are pretty competitive. So then somebody said, we need to make sure that our staff are working well. Unusual again for a drill barrier, but there we go. So I said, yeah, we managed the whole escape team. We need to make sure that people are motivated, and we'll do that. We'll develop their skills, and people will be proud because they'll know that they've achieved high qualifications in tunnel digging. And it's something they might use outside when they've escaped. But we'll give them good working conditions. Yeah, we'll keep the tunnel clean and free of smells. And if people aren't performing well, rather than criticising them, we'll take them aside and we'll support them so that they can be effective at whatever it is that they're going to do. So by this time, the room's actually really is a really nice buzz, and I'm thinking I'm beginning to get something. So I was sent off to the library to do some of the initial research about how to escape from prison, and so here I am, another artistic representation of me, because there were no cameras at that stage. And I found a photograph in this book of a tunnel which had been dug from a Mexican prison. And that's actually true, that's the one that the guy escaped from a couple of years ago, but it's a long story. So anyway, I took it back to the group and I said, look at this, how about this? That looks like an awesome tunnel to me, and I think we should have a lash at tunneling. Well, the guy who was the big tunneler, he put his hand up and he said, nah. He said, that is not a tunnel, that's a little sort of rabbit hole. He said, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it properly. And if we're going to have a tunnel, we're going to have a really damn good tunnel. I want to have the best tunnel that's ever been done to escape from a prison. And everybody in the room was so onto it and so enthusiastic that they all put their hands, yeah, we don't want a tunnel like that, Gringo, we want the best tunnel. So over the next year, we really got into it, and all the education programs run. There was a safety Moodle video to watch, and there were exams. Sorry. And we did all those things that I talked about. Tom said, oh God, I've got to hurry up. So we did all the things that I talked about. And at the end of the year, I'm very proud to be able to show you the tunnel through which I escaped. This is when it was having its final safety inspection, just before we left, okay? And we've got the hard hats here and the reflective jackets and the whole lot. So the point I want to make here is a very simple one, okay? When it was just me, that was my tunnel. And to use my grandmother's words, it was bloody awful, Michael. Okay? But once everybody got together and put aside their pride and their embarrassment and all the rest of it, that was the tunnel that we did. And it's a good tunnel. So only those of you who are most extraordinarily hungover will not realise that what I've been talking about, of course, is clinical governance. But the point I wanted to make is that clinical governance is not something that's complicated. And I can remember when I was younger having to learn the 7 pillars, firstly for interviews, and then when I was interviewing people, and I used to think, God, I hope nobody asked about the 7 pillars when I was on an interview panel, because I could never remember them all. And I think people make it all far too complicated. Clinical governance is just simple, common sense. If you want to do anything well that's complicated, then that's the sort of thing you put in place. Please don't remember clinical governance as being audit and effectiveness and research and education and all those things, because it's just common sense in it. But I feel I've really succeeded today if you went away when somebody asks you in an interview what's clinical governance, you say it's common sense. it's common sense, but it's only successful if there aren't the barriers that people put in place. If people won't put aside their pride, their arrogance, their shame, their guilt, their embarrassment, and show an earnest commitment to wanting to learn or wanting to improve, then things don't get better. Okay, so now I want to talk, this second story is shorter, you'll be pleased to hear. It's actually true. About a group of people who I was very lucky to meet. I'm a complete nerd, I used to fly, and through an extraordinary piece of good luck, I was able to meet the British Royal Air Force's aerobatic team, the Red Arrows. I met them in Cyprus, which is where they train. They do a new display every year, and they learn that and practice it in Cyprus, where the weather's good in the winter, in the UK winter, and then they come back and fly the displays in the UK during the summer. And the bit that I want to talk about is their daily debrief, because once they've learned all the individual moves, they put them together into a display, and they fly the display somewhere around about 50 times in Cyprus. And the display is filmed from the ground from several different angles, and it's filmed from cockpit mounted cameras. And when they come down, they spend about 2 hours going through the videos. And this is the bit that I got to see. Okay, so up go the videos, and the people who are there, the pilots, are all saying, "Oh, I didn't do that right. I didn't do that right. I'm red 8 and I was slow into that, and I should have come in higher or whatever." And they're pulling up their own mistakes almost all the time. They very rarely pull up anybody else's, because they don't have to, because everybody's absolutely committed to it being the most successful aerobatic team in the world. So they talk about their mistakes completely openly. And at the end of the session, there's a competition. They have to persuade each other who's committed the biggest blooper. Yep. And they fight for their blooper to be the biggest. And the person who's made the biggest stuff up buys the beer for the first round of the drinks afterwards. Okay. Now they do that after every single display flight in training. And when they come back to the UK, they fly 40 or 45 actual displays around the country. And after every one, they sit down for 2 hours and they go through the whole thing, minute by minute, second by second on the video, identifying their mistakes, looking at where they can do it better, and they even do that after the last display of the year. They're immensely proud people. They take huge pride in the fact that they're Red Arrow pilots and that they're the best aerobatic team in the world. But there is absolutely zero pride when they come into the room. You don't hear them saying, Red 8 came in late on that move, and Red 8 says, yeah, that's because Red 5 was wiggling his wings and put me off. Okay? They just fess up and do it. Okay? And because of that, they are able to safely fly quite close together. So you'll appreciate from the little bit of ground there that these guys are coming out of a big barrel roll. They're travelling at about 400 kilometres an hour, which is about 400 knots, which is about 650 kilometres an hour. And the separation between the planes is somewhere between 6 and 8 feet, so a couple of metres. Okay. So that's looks quite exciting. This picture, I think, is probably even worse, because I don't know if everybody appreciates this, but when you put a plane upside down, all the controls work back to front. Yeah, so push the stick forward, the plane goes up and set it down and that sort of thing. So flying that close upside down to one of your mates is a bit dodgy. And then I put up this last picture, okay? And this, I absolutely promise you, is not a Photoshop. This is real, okay? And if you count the vapor trails, you realise that there are actually 4 aircraft in there, okay? So, a couple of questions. Which of you has been to a cardiac arrest and been part of a cardiac arrest team that worked that slickly? That's a sort of a no. And which of you has ever been to an M&M meeting which has been as open and honest as the debriefs that I've described for those guys? Which is a bit sad when you consider that what these people are doing is flipping around in planes to provide some entertainment for some people who want to watch them on the ground. But a cardiac arrest team and a morbidity and mortality meeting are actually designed to save people's lives. So that's the challenge for you guys. And I appreciate that the Redos have a huge amount of time, and that's something that isn't necessarily made freely available to medical staff and clinicians in general. But we really should take clinical governance a whole lot more seriously. So where to from here? I don't want to leave you hanging just thinking that everything's desperate. I think I guess the point I want to make, apart from the fact that clinical governance is common sense, is that although it's common sense, it's not common practice. And that's because in a lot of organisations, there isn't the commitment from clinicians and managers to really make it work. Now, some of you, not all of you, I'm beginning to realise are RMOs, or if you are, you're very old RMOs. not that there's anything wrong with being very old, I'm very old myself. But anyway, so I want to talk to you quickly. This is my last slide, so if you're desperate, put the pen and slide up. You can take it from me that I'm pretty much done. So in Northland, there's an example of what RMOs can do, and I think that's absolutely fantastic. Nothing to do with me, actually, but we're having a talk about clinical governance and safety, and actually why people make mistakes. And some of the RMOs were talking about the fact that they admit patients when they're on take, but then the next day they never see them again. They're busy with their own patients on their ward. They're on a day off. By the time they come back, the patient's gone home, and so they don't know what happened to all those patients who they admitted. And yet they said, very occasionally they'd hear that, the consultant saw the patient the next morning, and you said they had a chest infection, and he said they had heart failure, and people would really like to have known when they got things wrong. And they also recognise that they do make mistakes. They make mistakes. If you go to a ward and you've got 3 drug charts to fill out, and somebody interrupts you when you're in the middle of doing it, sometimes you write the thing on the wrong drug chart and stuff. And they said, how can we, it would be good if there was a way that we could share that so that we could learn from each other's mistakes rather than always having to learn from our own, which is, I guess, goes back to my first story. And so the guys in Northland have actually put together a little electronic database which they can contribute to anonymously and say, I stuffed something up, and say what it was. Or they can give somebody some feedback. A patient came in with multiple sclerosis, and actually the right thing to do wasn't to put them in a very hot room, or something like that. Yeah. And so they're off their own bat. They're doing something which I think will make a real difference. And because we have a monthly quality and safety meeting where I sit down with the RMOs, we tease out from that database the things that I need to put into the RMO induction handbook, which are things that here in Northland, we found out that there can be a problem with this or with that, and it would be a shame for you to make the same mistake. Yeah. Tom Reynolds, who's going to be talking later today, is responsible for the RMO handbook, and that in itself was a fantastic safety measure because it was a way that people coming after him knew all about the ins and outs of being a houseman in Whangarei. And I know he's talking later, so I don't want to steal his thunder in case that's what he's going to talk about. But so really, I've sort of come to the end. This is my very last slide. Oh no, 2, sorry. God, he's going to hate me. So the future's you. Yeah. I have to challenge you to do what you know to be right, and sometimes you will come up against resistance, and if you do, then that's a tragic reflection on the person who's providing the resistance, because they should support you. If you do fight for what's right for patients, I promise you you'll never regret it, and you will have done what's best for patients, and there is nothing more important than that. And the very last thing is just this, and I'm taking a bit of a punt here because I haven't asked all the CMOs around the country, but Nigel's happy, so that's good. You sometimes, I think, it's hard for you to know where to go, and you don't want to go and talk to the head of department to say that you think your boss has made a terrible mistake, and they do. So if you're in doubt, go and talk to the CMO, because our whole life is looking after patients and making sure they get the best quality care. And it's so interesting, and although my IQ is nothing like Nigel's, the basic thing which drives me, I suspect, is exactly the same, which is that I am the biggest patient advocate in the organisation. I sit at the executive table, I can fight for patients there, I meet people on the wards, I can fight for patients there, and if there's something wrong in the organisation which is impacting on patient care, I need to know about it so that I can do something about it. And I believe that every CMO around the country will have that same viewpoint. Okay, so If you've got any questions, I'm very happy to answer them. If you want to know if I really escaped from Maxim prison, I didn't. Thank you, Mike. I'm going to have to present you with the inaugural Curtis Walker Prize for the most amusing and amazing anecdote of a conference. Now, similar to being in a prison, the only currency I had was one of these little RDA chocolates. And I might have to go listen to the Spice Girls after that in comparison to the Rolling Stones. And certainly for the scenarios later on in our clinical governance breakout sessions, I'm disappointed and slightly deflated to say we don't have anything quite so colourful. So thank you for that. Look, I don't have any questions having listened to that, but it does give us a few minutes, about 5 minutes, for some questions from the floor for Mike about his thoughts on clinical governance. So happy to take some questions. Even about getting out of prison, by the sounds of it. So, at the back, thank you.
So it's a question for both Nigel and Mike. Suzanne, I work at the Brunton District Health Board, and I'm not a doctor. Sorry, everybody. I just was quite interested in your career progression and how you guys have got to the level that you're at. Whether that was a deliberate process that you followed in terms of your career, and yeah, just kind of to talk through that and whether that would be a useful learning for the RMAs in the room who might be keen to be in that kind of position.
Well, it's tempting to say that I just moved around the world changing careers as quickly as I could to try and keep one step ahead of the regulatory authorities, but the truth is, especially as the chair of the medical council here, so I'm not going to say that. So the truth is, I started out life as a surgeon. I was a cardiothoracic surgeon. Clever physicians came along and invented stents, and there obviously wasn't going to be a future in that, so I went into emergency medicine. I came to New Zealand because I knew that emergency medicine in New Zealand was far advanced as compared to in the UK, and eventually, having seen a lot of things in both fields, I realised that if I was going to reach the end of my career and be fulfilled, I wanted to have had a chance to change some big things that I thought were fundamentally wrong. And the biggest of those things was the way people addressed quality and safety issues. So, you know, this is the easiest talk I've ever prepared for because it's all I think about day and night. And I think your clinical career is wonderful, and I love patients and I love working with patients. But I have absolutely no regret about changing now to being full-time as a medical administrator. It sounds dreadful, because I do get the chance to advocate for patients all day long, which is what I like.
For me, a bit of an accident. There's three things, I suppose, that came along my life. Number one, I was arranging the training for the membership program for college physicians in the hospital I worked in, big hospital in Sunderland. And every Wednesday I had to find a whole bunch of patients and get all organised. And I had patients to see that I needed to sort some stuff out, and I thought, well, I better cancel the training. And I thought, if one of those guys I'm doing the training with learns something and applies it to 100 patients over his career, that's more benefit, more patient benefit than I'll get by seeing the 3 or 4 patients I could see now that'll be fine until tomorrow. It's actually more benefit to do the training than it was to be seeing. It's kind of a bit of a revelation for me. That it's the patients who don't see that sometimes you make the biggest difference for them. Next thing, I got a letter when I was an advanced trainee in North of England from Liam Donaldson. He was the chief medical officer there, later in the UK. And it said they were doing this exciting thing about management, it's new, management leadership training for senior registrars, and it would all be great. And I read between the lines, which basically said, if you don't do this training, you're not getting a consultant's job. So I thought, oh, so I rang up his secretary, and he said, oh, you're the first to ring up. We'll book you in for the course in Keswick. Lovely. I went to Lake District with 19 of my colleagues, senior registrars, 18 total skeptics, and 2 people like me said, oh, this might be interesting. And I met the people from the Birmingham Institute of Management Health Studies, Chris Hammond and John Clark, well-known people these days, and I had a revelation. there's this whole world of ability to make a difference across the system. And I learned about things, about organisations. I was outside the Harry Potter bubble for a moment. Most of my colleagues didn't like being outside the Harry Potter bubble. I learned real things. I now know that if you want to learn how to run a hospital, to make patients flow, you go to Air New Zealand and go to their flight centre. They know how to run a hospital much better than we'll ever know how to run one. So I realised that the world outside was applicable to health and really, really important. And actually, sadly, no for the Medical Council, this is still missing from New Zealand postgraduate medical education. Now in the UK, you would never get signed up by the college or vocational registration until you've done that sort of training. And what I did was like a week's residential course. They now call the sheep dip. It was too little. So actually we have a need. So any of you who have the opportunity to take part in leadership training and those sorts of things, you will find that will give you an understanding and a pathway. The rest is just working your way through it. In New Zealand, traditionally, most of the clinical leaders have been working clinical posts and taken up the formal leadership roles later. In Australia, they take it earlier and go through the Ratman College program. But you can do it in the New Zealand way quite easily.
Thank you. There's certainly lots of current and future leaders in this room as well, so thank you. Look, just one quick question then. How many of the CMOs still retain some clinical function amongst the duties? I know it varies. Do you have any idea about that?
I can't give you a number. It's still the majority, I think. Still by far the majority, which is unusual compared to Australia. And I think that's a really good thing. I don't think they all have to. There's a role, you know, maybe in a few years' time I will say I'm just going to focus just on that, but it's an advantage for New Zealand that most of the people in senior clinical leadership do clinical work.
I think, maybe just time for one more very quick question, thank you, and then we'll move to the next speaker.
Can I just make a general comment that in talking to people it's easy to confuse what clinical means. My life is clinical all the time. It's just that I'm not sitting down treating a patient. But often in my role I find I'm the one who's dealing with something that's highly complex. I might be talking to people who are struggling to find their way through the system and things like that. So it's just a different world. Sometimes we talk about non-clinical and clinical, but sometimes maybe we should be talking about direct patient care and indirect patient care or something like that. Because I think that's the kind of thing that we really can contribute in those CMO type roles, don't you think? That really we are providing something that we bring our clinical competence and clinical skills to in a sort of a way that we're not really not clinical anymore. Does that make sense? Am I being too controversial?
No, thank you, Kim. That's an excellent point, and certainly the definition of that the Medical Council applies to clinical practice is more broad than just hands-on patient care. So, no, that's an excellent point and well made.
I agree entirely. I'll adjust my words.
So, look, with that, we thank our two speakers for this part of the program.